Okay, this is part 2 of my tutorial about creating an a waffle model of an arbitrarily shaped solid or volume in Rhino. And in this video I'm going to go over how to take the contours generated from the previous video and prepare them for laser cutting. So these are the lines that are the contours generated from this object. And I have grouped them in two groups that reflect the separate dimensions that they run in. And so the task is we need to get these ribs, as I'll call them, separated and notched so that once they are laser cut, they will be able to fit together. Okay, so just some assumptions at the outset. The first one is that these ribs are half an inch tall, and so the notches that we'll need to make in them will need to be half of that, so a quarter of an inch. So they'll be notched. The top layer will be notched on the bottom, and the bottom layer will be notched on the top. And the other assumption that I'm making is that our materials that we're going to use to laser cut are 1/16 of an inch thick. So a museum board or mat board or something of that nature. So to start, what I want to do is I want to come up with geometry that will help me locate the notches that indicate, well, where they're going to fit together. So one way to do this, I'm sure there are multiple ways. The way that I've been doing it is if I select these ribs, I can, since they are planar cross sections, contours of my model, I can use the planar surface command to turn these into surfaces. And I'll do that for the other direction as well. And the result, obviously it is starting to get towards geometry that we could use for presentation purposes, but that's there are some other steps that we'll have to take there first. But for now, what this allows us to do is to come up with the intersections for each of these, geometry for each of the intersections of these ribs. Alright, so to do that, I want to select each of these surfaces. Now, I don't want to actually select the curves in this case, because when you intersect curves, it produces points, and we don't want to do that. So just to demonstrate, if I intersect, if I select all of these and intersect, on the intersect command, you'll see here it generates all these points where the lines intersect. So we don't want that. What we want is just the surfaces. So what I'll do is I will use my selection filter, that's this guy here, selection filter, and I will turn off my ability to select surfaces. Sorry, I want to do the opposite. I want to turn off my ability to select the curves. Okay. So now, when I select this, I can run the intersect command, and the result will not generate points. It will just generate these vertical lines here. Alright, at this point, I think I'm going to create another copy of my geometry so that I can leave this stage here and keep working with this geometry. So again, I'm just going to select curves. And it should allow me to select, again, I need to reverse my ability to select here. I need to just select curves now instead of surfaces, because what I want to work with for laser cutting is just curves. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste that, and then I'm going to move it off to the side. Alright. So now, what I've moved is not just the original curves, but or the contours, but also the intersection lines. And I still have my groups here for horizontal and well, they're both horizontal, but perpendicular groups. So I actually am going to need this intersection geometry for both sets of ribs. So I'm going to select just those vertical intersections. I'm going to do that by selecting everything and then deselecting with the control key held down, deselecting the groups. I'll do that in the other direction. Oops. Okay, so now I just have those vertical lines, and I'm going to group those as well, and then I'm going to duplicate that, copy, paste, so that now I can grab and separate each dimension or each set of curves. So now what we have is two sets of ribs, and they each have the intersection points or lines at the right locations for the notches that we need to create. So the next decision is to decide which of these groups should be the top and which should be the bottom one. So I'm just going to arbitrarily call this one the bottom. And what I'm going to need to do for this is actually create the geometry for each of those notches. Now you can do this many ways. The way that I've been thinking about doing it has to do with modeling an individual notch and then extending it, because there are cases in this geometry where the halfway point is a lot more than 1/4 of an inch. So that the assumption that I was making about 1/2 of an inch being the height of these ribs only applies in those areas where the lines are actually well, equally spaced. And when you've got a curve condition like this, the vertical lines don't follow that curve, and they can result in different sized ribs and associated notches. But my material thickness is not going to change. So what I can do is I can actually model the notch that I'm going to use at each of these intersection points. And that's really simple, and I'm actually going to make it larger than the notch. I'm going to have one dimension be 1/16, which is my material thickness. But then the other one I'm actually going to say, instead of like 1/4 of an inch, I'm going to say 1/2 of an inch. And the reason I'm doing that is because of those places where it's halfway is more than 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. So I create this notch geometry, and I'm going to rotate it so that it's in a matching plane. So now that is in the same plane or the same orientation as these ribs, and I can start placing it where I need it. So since this is at the bottom, or these are the bottom ribs, what I'm going to do is grab this rectangle, and I'm going to use the copy command because that will allow me to pick a reference point from which to copy and place this object, and it will also let me place multiples of those objects really quickly. So when I do that, I'm making sure that my mid object snap is on. Now I'm not sure that I got this right here, so I'm going to start over. Okay, copy, and I'm going to make sure I'm getting the midpoint there. Okay, so now I've got the midpoint, and then, midpoint, and now I'm going to place that at the midpoint of these ribs, and I'm just going to go down the line. It looks like 1/2 an inch wasn't enough, so I'm actually going to need to extend this even further. Maybe I should have made it like 1 inch. And I'll do that here and then copy this one. So I've got plenty of depth there, and so I'm going to copy and again just paste at the midpoints. And then for the well, you get the drift for this. You'll have to do that for each of those intersection points, and then the same thing goes for here. You'll just have to do it in a different orientation. So I'm going to copy one of these over, and this time I'm just copy pasting it because first I need to reorient this for these ribs, which are 90 degrees from the other ribs. So see, I think that does it. Alright, so now for these, since these are the top ribs, I want to place this at the bottom. So I'm going to I'm going to copy this again, copy command, grab the middle at the top of the notch, and now I'm going to place that at the midpoints here, so that I'm creating the cuts that we'll use to cut out the notches at halfway points for the top ribs as well. Okay, so that's the process there, and I'm not too concerned about trimming this. At this point, there's really not much that adds, because what I can do when I lay these ribs out flat is I can actually make these cuts separately. So it doesn't matter if I'm cutting out the notches first. I can come back later and cut out the actual shape of the rib, and those notches will already be cut. So we'll get to that here. We'll get to laying that out in the next video, and we'll see how that layout process works. Thanks for watching.